Three, two, one. Welcome everybody to the Haunted Hacker podcast number, I don't know, Gerald, what number do you want to give it? Between 80 and 100.
Between 80 and 100, let's go 97.
97, perfect. Today we have Gerald Auger. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
You're in the minority there. Most people butcher it.
I try not to. I try to make sure I get all that correct. We have him today, and he's going to be talking to us about his journey into cyber and things he's passionate about. Really quick, some news. I just got an email today that I'll be speaking for 1,000 ICE agents in November, which is new for me. Also, I'll be speaking for the DHS working group out of Oklahoma that same month. So I'm really looking forward to that. Other than that, not a ton of news. I posted today, I just found out today that I have lupus, which is not a fun thing to have. So I'm looking for ways to balance my time and balance my work and personal life. That's been my number one goal that I set since I found out. So I'll be working on that and give you updates on that. So without further ado, Gerald, it's awesome to have you on the show. I've been following your stuff for quite a while. And why don't you give us a little background information about yourself and kind of your journey into cyber?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And we said before we started recording, like I've seen Haunted Hacker. It's like everywhere. So I'm really glad to finally have the opportunity to come on and share my story. So I've been working in cybersecurity since the mid 2000s, and I graduated with a computer science degree. So I thought you were supposed to be a software engineer or software developer. I always joke that I don't call myself a software engineer because if you look at my code, like another software developer would be like, this is a hot mess. But if you're the client, right, it runs, it does what the requirements were. So I'm a software developer. So I did that for a few years and it was fine. I actually enjoyed the creation of a product, right? Like I've always said it's like as close to a blue collar job in a white collar world as you can get, because at the end of the day, you have something tangible you can kind of point to and say, this is what I did. But when I found out about cybersecurity, this is probably around like, I don't know, 04, 05, I was blown away, right? So I grew up kind of reading 2600. If you're familiar with that, right? It was like the hacker magazine. I would go to like Barnes and Noble to read it because I didn't want to have my mailing list associated with 2600. So I would go to Barnes and Noble, I would read it. And I really was intrigued by that stuff, but I thought it was like for, elite people only, right? Like super, super technical people who just, beyond me. Even as a computer science person, I was like, this is beyond me. So when I found out about cybersecurity, the very first thing that really hooked me, if you will, is I found out that what vulnerability scanners were. I found out vulnerability scanners existed, and it just blew my mind because I thought you were supposed to, you were like an expert on AS400, and then you could like be a hacker of AS400. In reality, for those who don't know what a vulnerability scanner is, you just like point it at something and it tells you basically all the misconfigurations and missing patches and stuff. So it's kind of like a cheat sheet. So, the inevitable evolution of that was like, holy mackerel, this thing exists. Why isn't everybody being attacked all over the place, right? Because if script kiddies can basically point this thing and it tell you the secrets or the weaknesses, why aren't people just knocking everything over? So I like puzzles. I like uncovering things. So I kind of fell down the rabbit hole or, Alice in Wonderland hole, whatever you want to call it, and never looked back. I really, really, Mike, I'd be curious on your thoughts about it. Like for me, one of the best things about the cybersecurity industry, and one of the reasons I went on to get a PhD, is because it's so wide and like each element can go so deep that it's like unending, the amount of like learning you can do and you can go anywhere with it. It's so large a topic.
Absolutely. Yeah. The industry itself is just, it's like Alice in Wonderland, right? And with all the characters, especially the principles. So when I first got involved with cybersecurity, I was more on the hacker side. And I actually read 2600 and I had an article published in 2600 in the book or whatever. And to me, that was exciting. The whole infrastructure piece of it, I didn't know anything about how networks work or how to code. I learned all that stuff as I was trying to get into various systems. Like I literally learned, different systems when I was actually trying to get in. Just crash course, find out what I need to know, and then look at the behaviors and then jump into it. But after time, I started really sitting down and really focusing on the different principles and the different things that excited me within cybersecurity. Coding is one of the things that I had to force myself to learn. Because it wasn't one of those things that I was taught as a young kid or anything like that. It was just something that I knew I had to have in order to do my job correctly. So I dove off into that. But you're absolutely correct. The industry is so wide, and people come from all different walks of life and different, other journeys, other jobs. I've seen doctors, I've seen lawyers, all sorts of people that cross over into cybersecurity because it's not going anywhere. It fuels our life, and everything we do is based on the internet now. So anybody getting into it, it's really an exciting time because I think we're at that precipice of major change when it comes to technology and the world in general. I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on that too, like where technology is going and how we can harness it, as well as how we can protect it. Because I think that the biggest issue we have is a threat to cybersecurity.
Yeah, so I'll answer where do I think tech's going in kind of two capacities. One within the context of developing a workforce for cybersecurity, and then more kind of I think more what you were asking around the macro picture of technology and how we secure it. So, I agree right now. I've been saying this quite a bit lately that, we, in my opinion, when like same as you, Mike, when we came up, there wasn't really resources available. Like in my education, there wasn't even cybersecurity. That wasn't even a thing. And then being able to learn about how to be a pen tester, or a taxonomy on how pen testing might or attack, all these different things, like none of that existed. And now we live in this golden age of not just resource availability, but free resource availability. I mean, there is no barrier except having, I suppose, an internet connection, which many, developing countries, they may not have running water, but they have internet, right? Like it's unbelievable. So, it's about making the time and the commitment and this technology, this expansion of technology, this availability of, technological resources that go down in price and go up in speed, power, availability it's awesome. It's like this nexus of infrastructure that can support delivery of education to a population that desperately want it. And to your point, it's not just the 22-year-old graduate who happened to come up in a middle-class United States family and has access to a 4-year education. It's a developing country person. It's a single mother of 3. It's a person who's been an electrician for 20 years and is just, their back and knees are blown out and they want something else. So, to me, like the direction and the velocity that we're traveling at relative to technology to support that is just fantastic. And I'm huge loving it. Now, to your question around where I think tech is going and how we may secure that from a cybersecurity practitioner perspective, because for those who don't know, I do a Simply Cyber YouTube channel where I help people get in, but I'm also like a 9-to-5 guy who's like a CISO. Like I run my own program, I build it out, small workforce there. So I do blue team and I do GRC and I do all these other things. But as far as where we're going, say what you will about AI and machine learning. I know it's like punchlines and buzzwords, and we joke about, vendor bingo and stuff like that. But if you can automate the basic, simple stuff that happens all the time, like, looking at a phishing email and telling if it's actually a phish or not, or looking at some indicators of compromise and, like this box is clearly popped, like let's isolate it. Like, I think that if we can move into having smart detection engineering around with machine learning enabling, I think we're going to actually become better at securing assets, which I love, right? So this term SOAR, security orchestration, automation, remediation, like that's like the big buzzword in the industry right now, but there is merit to it. And, I think if you can automate the basic stuff, you can allow people to focus on the hard problems instead of getting mucked up in the grind, blocking and tackling. And I know you're an offensive guy, Mike. This is true on the offensive side too, right? Like I'm sure when you do pen tests, you find the same, pass the hash going on, or SMB shares or whatever. Like you find the same stuff all the time, and it probably is defeating for you, or the favorite part of your job. If you can automate all that, and then you can focus on doing some complicated hack or getting to an AS400 or whatever the client is. I guess it's, to me, the automation piece of it, it's not only going to add value, but it's going to allow you to deploy your resources in a much more valuable way than wasting it, like a senior person being wasted on junior level work.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I do come from a background of red teaming, but currently I actually run an MDR. I'm an MDR manager, and so I do a lot of blue team stuff and incident response, and I still help out with our company's red team and some of the red team functions. But you bring up an interesting topic when it comes to AI. I actually had this discussion with Max Hinnemeyer from Darktrace some months back. A friend of mine from Cambridge, been working for Darktrace for a while. A really smart guy. And they come up with a thing called the AI analyst for Darktrace. And what they've done is they've taken some of their functionality and they've monitored how analysts triage alerts, like tier 1 analysts, how they triage alerts. And they've built an AI engine around that group of analysts to perform that initial triage function. So you're basically relieving those analysts of the triage period of it and letting them dive down into more research functions of the alerting process, which I think is like phenomenal. Because with my team, I have about 16 people in my MDR, and most of the time is spent triaging alerts. And when you have, a number of clients, you can imagine how many alerts are generated per day. And don't let, an incident response pop up, because then everybody gets dispersed trying to maintain this incident. So I think that the AI tech in security, hopefully we'll be able to hone and sharpen that to where it can relieve some of the pressures of the human aspect. The only part that I don't think we'll ever be able to replace from a defensive side or offensive is the human creativity function. Being able to visualize and be creative with the way they defend or the way that they, do penetration testing. One thing I would like to see AI take over and completely automate is report writing on the offensive side. That would be fantastic, because that's my biggest downfall is I don't really enjoy report writing. But a lot of the stuff that I do now. So recently I was given an exe file from a guy that I know very well. And he said, look, I have a client and they think there's some injection into this exe and it's kind of malicious. Take a look at it and see what you can do. That to me is the most exciting part, because I get to look at somebody else's creation and figure out where they were trying to be malicious and reverse the code. I think we're going to need more of that in the future. Everybody's, really focused on network attack and defend. But I'd like to see some more of the AI and some more of the functionality and focus go into looking at some of this malcode, and be able to predict where that malcode is going, like the technology of it, and be able to stop it before it gets there, especially ransomware. What are your thoughts on ransomware? Because I know that's really a hot topic right now.
Yeah. So, I always, tip my hat to the threat actors, right? Like as a practitioner, I don't like it. I wish it wasn't happening, but at the same time, as an adversary and someone who's in the field, like you can look at it and say brilliant, right? Because malware is just software, right? It's the intent of the software that makes it, evil or whatever you want to say. I guess what I would say is it kind of illustrates how poor most organizations' cyber hygiene is, right? So, you hear of like the SamSam ransomware where they go in and then they quietly deploy and then they logic bomb and hit everyone at once, which is like more advanced, right? Or like a SolarWinds hack or something like that. But I would say by and large, especially with these ransomware as a service affiliate programs, they are, I don't want to call them script kiddies, but they're basically just kind of marching through those easy hacks that we talked about, or those easy vulnerabilities, and deploying the ransomware, sometimes, not deploying it correctly. Right. So I don't see it going anywhere. I just read this morning that Australia is now passed some like ransomware type of policy, and they're trying to like do some global thing. And I know Biden and the United States is leading an effort for a global ransomware initiative. And I know sometimes I think about that stuff, and I worked in federal IT for 7 years. It's like it's so bloated and so bureaucratic, and budgets are already set for 2022, probably 23. Like this is a problem right now, and it moves quickly. And because threat actors are making so much money, like so much money, there's clearly no motivation for them to slow down, especially when, allegedly, the host nation is like not is like knowingly endorsing or intentionally turning a blind eye because of who the targets are of that actor. So they basically have safe haven in where they're operating, and there's not going to be extradition out. So I often joke, Mike, like if I didn't have a moral compass, I would be in ransomware. Like it's just too lucrative, and frankly too easy to get away with, especially with crypto. Now I know with blockchain you can follow the wallets, but there's twisters and shifters and spinners, and there's all ways to get the money out. But so anyways, I don't think ransomware is going anywhere. I think kind of the macro level global initiative it's a fine idea. It's good posturing, and I suppose it's the right thing to do, but I don't perceive it as effective. I think I really don't know what the answer is, short of like black ops type response. You know what I mean? And I don't even know if that's appropriate or not. But I will say, like, when Colonial Pipeline got hit, like, if my company got hit, it would be like a news article on page 6 and like, oops, sorry. And then people forget about it. Colonial Pipeline got hit. The Southeast United States, people are like having a panic run on gas. People are pouring gas in like soda bottles and stuff. It like was a hot mess on fire. And like the United States government got involved with swift response, and we saw the money come back. We saw like allegedly is it Black Matter? I think, or Dark Side, they disband immediately. So clearly that type of response was effective, but it's just not consistent.
Right. I think that you brought up a good point about the government getting involved, right? And the new initiative. I think that was more of a political ploy than anything else, because they made it very, very evident that Russia was not going to be involved in that situation. And to me, if you're going to deal with ransomware and have a global initiative, you probably should engage a company or a country like Russia, because I mean, there's a lot of activity coming out of there. And what country doesn't get hit with ransomware? Russia. They have a treaty amongst themselves that they don't hit Russian machines or Russian language machines. So that's really interesting. And I've talked to a few people about the status of ransomware and where ransomware is going. And it's such a big business, like you said. The business model is perfect. I mean, people make money. They run it like a call center. They sell it like a product. It's just, and there's so many different moving pieces just within one piece of ransomware or one attack. I do think that, as far as like you mentioned Black Ops. So I've been tossing around a theory of, instead of being reactive and waiting until we get hit with ransomware and then having to dig ourselves out and pay these huge premiums for cyber liability insurance, why aren't there more groups actively going out and trying to disrupt that chain? Why aren't there more groups going out and trying to infiltrate those ransomware networks and take them hostage or bring that infrastructure down? I know that the government probably is involved with that in some sort of way, because a lot of people, they always point fingers at Russia and China, but they don't understand that this is collateral. I mean, we do it just as much as everybody else does, if not more. You look at Stuxnet and stuff like that. But I just can't help but think that there should be more groups involved in bringing down that infrastructure. People with the offensive ability and capability and talents being put to work to stop that cancer of ransomware.
Yeah, if I had to guess, because of how sophisticated the United States government is, and this is just a theory, like, and I didn't serve, so who knows if this is just made up or not, but I would think that it's just not a priority, which sounds ridiculous, but I feel like if you took the power of the NSA and the intelligence community in the United States and pointed it at ransomware within 3 months, those groups would be dissolved or not interested in being in ransomware anymore. But I mean, if you think about the bigger picture, right? We've got Afghanistan, we've got geopolitical things, we've got our internal turmoil. Like there's a lot going on. Yeah. And I just don't think ransomware has bubbled up. We saw Colonial Pipeline, a swift response, right? So at that instance, it bubbled up. But and that's my theory, is that it's just not a priority, even though it seems like a priority to everybody.
Yeah, and that's partially why I say that new agenda and motivation to be on a global stage, I think that's more political, lip movement than it is actually, want to solve a problem. I noticed that in the government, a lot of people react. The government reacts when the sentiment of the people tends to build, and then you don't hear from them for a while. It's interesting. I talked to a former CIA agent about ransomware, and he had some really interesting things to say. And hopefully, he's going to be on the show next month, and then maybe we'll get a little bit more information from him as far as what the government's doing. But I'm with you. Like, I just don't think it's that big of a priority unless it affects the government's pocketbook. Whether it has to do with if it has to do with critical infrastructure, and there's a possibility of losing a lot of money, absolutely, we'll jump on it. But little shots here and there, that's not a big deal to them. So, I know you have this podcast, and I've listened to your podcast quite a bit. I take the dog for a walk, and I listen, on the weekend. Last weekend, I think that you had, a new stream where it was just you and talking to the people, and they were asking questions. Tell me about how your podcast evolved and what drove you to want to be a voice, and how's it going now?
Yeah, so the Simply Cyber YouTube channel started in December of 19, and I had been doing a podcast, like a true just like voice podcast, for about 2 years internally to the medical university I worked at as part of an information security awareness effort. So I had learned from someone who was in the business of podcasting how to produce a podcast, right? Like it's not complicated, but if you don't know what you're doing, it can be a little overwhelming with the equipment and stuff like that. So I had these skills, but I was constrained by, it was an employment thing. Certain things I could talk about, certain things I couldn't. But I really enjoyed the idea of the creation of content. And I was like, I want to start a YouTube channel and get the word out, because we haven't talked too much about it, but like I am incredibly passionate about cybersecurity. I guess I mentioned it briefly earlier. Like I got a PhD in cyber operations, right? I didn't get a pay bump at work. I didn't get a new job because of it. Like I literally just love the field that much that I wanted to consume that much information and just be a master of it. So I wanted to share my information about cybersecurity. Like I wanted to get it out there, especially because I love our community, but a lot of the content is focused on offensive security, right? Like a lot of the YouTube content is offensive. And I came up on the GRC track, which is probably the less sexy of all of cybersecurity, but I've got some blue team experience. I know some people, and I just thought it was like an opportunity to, open the lens further for an audience that's uninitiated to cybersecurity to realize that it is this wide, it is this interesting a field. So I started making the YouTube channel, and I was doing one video every Monday, and which is good. And the really cool thing is I quickly wanted to talk about other topics that was not in my wheelhouse or my forte. So I started reaching out to people. I talked to Mick Douglas about purple teaming, and then he introduced me to Eric Capuano, who's like over at Recon InfoSec and expert blue teamer. So I interview him, and like I start building kind of this network of people, and it was really cool. And then I realized like, like a live stream would probably be a better format. But I never really wanted to get away from my Monday fixed episode. I wanted people to expect, hey, weekend's over, Mondays suck, but guess what? At noon, I got Simply Cyber, right? Let's do that. Mm-hmm. So I started doing that. I started doing intermittent live streams on Thursday, like as things kind of came up. And then maybe in the last 4 or 5 months, I've started doing it every Thursday. So now basically I'm on a Thursday fixed at 4:30 live stream and a Monday fix produced at noon. And now I've started dripping in the Saturday morning thing where it's just me. So with the live stream though, Mike, your podcast, you're interviewing guests. Like it's always me interviewing a guest. It's very, very seldomly me sharing me, for lack of a better term.
Right.
And I wanted to do that because in the few instances where it's just me, I'm no longer focused in managing and facilitating the discussion between me and the guest. I'm focused. The guest is really the audience. And I'll talk about something, but I really want it to be a collaborative kind of ask me anything Q&A. Like I want a community feel. And that podcast that you joined in on last Saturday was all about GRC analysts. Your first job as a GRC analyst, because people don't know, like, what does that job look like? What's a day in the life? How do I get experience? How do I skill up? So I did that. So I'm probably going to continue doing kind of those AMAs on Saturday morning. But again, I start off kind of intermittent, get a feel if is this something people are even interested in, and then continue on. But as far as the live streams go, I'm booked through mid-January at this point. So pretty excited about it. And, I don't know if you have like regulars in your community, but like I have, regulars in my community, and it's really nice. Like you see them come in and it's like, hey, how are you? Like, it's good to see you. We got a Discord server and stuff like that. So I'm giving a lot to the community and I'm getting a lot back. That's the best part of it.
Yeah, I think that's the key. When I first started podcasting, I did it just me. And it was like it was crazy how we started. It was literally like a 5-hour podcast one night. And it was just an idea to like get my story out and, get involved. And then it became more of, I'm actually learning things from people, and the guests I brought on because they're interesting. They have something that I want or something that I want to learn. Just like, bringing you on, looking at your resume and listening to you on your podcast. I was like, I really want to have a conversation with this guy. Those things kind of drive me. However, I haven't done the AMAs anymore. I think that might be a good way to go, but kind of like we start out with just an idea of just doing a couple of videos, whatever. It turned into a podcast and it turned into a community through Discord and then the magazine and all that good stuff. But yeah, I find it, I guess, fulfilling when someone joins the community and tells me, hey, I got a lot out of that last conversation you had. Or they say, hey, after the podcast, I hooked up with them and they've helped me in my career. Just a way to give back. And I think that's really interesting to see that. But most of all, I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy talking to people who have been places that I haven't been. And kind of a way to give back to the community, right? So all of us old guys that have been old guard from, before cybersecurity was a term, I try to get those guys together, like my buddy Chris Roberts and some of those other people, to do a talk, to just have a conversation. And something we can leave behind is kind of like a historical artifact. So we have like a library of guys that were there when it started. And I had to laugh. You brought up Mick Douglas. Me and Mick actually used to work together at a financial institution. And Mick is a great guy. I've been friends with him for a very long time. And you meet people like that, and relationships you form in this community. That's one thing that keeps me going, is the people I've met that I'm friends with, that I can call a friend, are there through thick and thin. And we help each other out. If I have a problem that I can't figure out, let's say a blue team problem or a personnel problem, I know that I can reach out to any one of my contacts who have that experience, and I know that we can share that. So I really enjoy that about the industry, but the industry does have its downsides as well. Just like any group of people or any industry, there's always, a few bad apples that tend to ruin things for people. So, I try to avoid that and try to keep a positive attitude. And even in the days that are very difficult to keep a positive attitude, I still reach out to people that I know are interesting to help me out, to give me information or teach me something that will make my day brighter. But yeah, I think the podcasting is a unique perspective on the industry alone. And there's so many podcasters that are popping up. I never, looked at myself as a podcaster or a professional. I watch your podcast. I'm like, wow, he's got his shit together. Like, it looks really cool. Like the whole streaming platform and everything, and the way you architect it looks really professional. Me, I just kind of like pop open a Zoom and record a conversation and hope people like it. So that I kind of rely on the guest a lot when it comes to their background and what we can lend to each other. I think that conversation is what drives the industry.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of great points, and one of the things that I tell people is, networking is critically important to finding a job, right? And it's you can't social networking, not computer networking, although you should really have your handle on that too. But you can't. One of the best ways to network is to contribute to the community, right? And whether it's a podcast or YouTube, a blog post, some activity in Discord, supporting, your podcast, for example, Mike, right? Like get involved, give to the community, and you'll start forming relationships and networking. And then eventually like jobs will come about, and maybe it's a good fit for you. So I love that about the community. You mentioned the old guard and how things have kind of changed. I am I guess mid guard. I guess I don't know how old guard is, but one of the interesting things that people may not realize about the community is that it used to be a bit more like toxic, and if you didn't know what was going on and you asked for help, the people who did know what was going on would be very basically rude to you, a very toxic environment, because it was like you were either elite or you were not. Nowadays, that toxicity is almost like vilified. And if you are toxic, and this is my favorite part, the community itself is self-policing at this point, where like toxic behavior is absolutely not allowed. And if you try to promote it or you try to push it, you will find yourself ostracized. And I just love it, because I hate exclusivity. I hate like just, I don't know, like arrogance and I'm better than you, or like, look at what I can do, you suck. Like there's no room for that. Like either help someone or get out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. And those people tend to congregate together too, and they become these bands of trolls. And it's just really irritating. You try to go about your day like giving back to the community and doing the right thing, and then you have these voices in your ear. It's irritating. I deal with that quite a bit. But I find the best way to deal with it is just like they say at the zoo: don't feed the animals. You respond to them, they're just that's what they want. They want to respond back. But you're right. Back in the old days, I remember in IRC, the way that I learned things was RTFM. Because if you asked a question, sit back and be prepared to get flamed. Because, if you're not willing to do the research, they're not willing to help you. And what surprises me these days, especially with like the millennials and some of the new people coming into the industry, is that I'll have someone come up to me and ask me, so what does this mean? And I'm like, I don't want to turn them off, but I'm like, you have so much more resources than I had back then. The internet is full of answers. I can help guide you, but you have to want that knowledge too. You can't just expect it to just osmosis and you become a cyber genius. There's ways to go about it. And I always tell people, like, when you first get into the industry, a lot of people say, well, how do I get my first job? How do I get noticed? How do I, go through my first interview and show that I have the passion, even though I just got out of school and I had no certifications? And I explained to them that, proof is in the pudding, right? So find something you're interested in, do a research paper, do a research project, document it, get a GitHub, throw that stuff on GitHub. That way you have something to refer to, like, hey, I did this and this is how I did it. Because I want to see actions. I want to see how you think, how you problem solve. Certifications, great. I know the industry needs them. It's an industry within itself, but I'm more concerned about people. And I think that's where we've lost touch with a lot of things in cyber. Is it's not about the ones and zeros. Those things are always going to be there. It's about people and relationships. I had a CISO ask me, how do you become successful in cyber, in blue teaming, in running teams? And I said, it's not about your tool set. It's not about going out and buying, the $500,000 product. It's about building relationships with those people that work for you and building a team and have a cohesive team. Because with a team, you can accomplish anything. You can accomplish very little if you rely on just a product. So I'm interested to see your thoughts on that, being a team leader and how do you think the industry is performing as far as like relationships and building those relationships within the industry?
Yeah, so I definitely think that there's a lot of different ways to go with that question. So I definitely think that there has been some of a transition or normalization of people working in the industry being able to be social and be able to speak to the business, right? And be able to think of succession planning within their department and be able to like actually talk to HR and get proper recs and stuff like that. So from a corporate perspective, there's been a lot of development, right? I feel like maybe 10 years ago, like, well, 10, 15 years ago, as we've said a couple times in this conversation, like cybersecurity wasn't a thing. So basically IT was doing cybersecurity and IT was, dark room behind a monitor. I am a service of the business. I am not engaging with end users. Like I keep the network running and you leave me alone. And now like they were dual hatted. So they had to do security, which it wasn't called that at the time, but there was this major disconnect of communication. And I feel like it's gotten significantly better in 2021 because it's much more evident, right? And you have specialized people who are aware, like especially on the GRC side, that you need to engage the end user community. And I also feel like as CISOs have come in, they sit like they're basically the conduit to the business. So they have in order to get funding, in order to get dollars for initiatives, they need to be able to communicate the value of information security to the business, right? It's not just compliance. There's business enablement. We can enter new markets because we're X, Y, and Z, et cetera. So I feel because of those things, we've come a long way and gotten better. And at the kind of operational level, I'm a huge advocate of security awareness. Like I think privileged access management and security awareness and multi-factor authentication are probably the three most important things that you can do for an organization. And people often scoff or dismiss security awareness as like, it's whatever. It's a compliance checkbox. It's once a year. End users don't care. Like I wish I didn't have end users. I'd be secure. But like really, like you're there to serve the business, right? You're there to make them make whatever widgets they're making or make whatever money they're making. So you have to be able to educate them and communicate to them effectively and really be able to speak in a way that resonates with them because you've seen it a million times, Mike. Like you get an email, right? For example, you get an email from whoever, marketing department or leadership or whatever, and it's like 1,000 words. Like delete, like you might read the title, but you're not reading the message. So it's just lost on you, right? But if the title of the article said like how to get a pay raise or like, these three things to get an extra day off, like you're interested, you will read that, right? So you need to target your communications for your end user community, which, I know I'm kind of deviating from your original question, but it's just so important to me to effectively educate your end user community. And personally, I always, I target my end user community with ways to protect themselves personally. Here's how you protect your personal bank account. Here's how you protect your, like, hey, update Google Chrome or your iPhone because you're going to get hacked, not hacked, but you know what I mean? And by conditioning those behaviors, they bring it to work with them. Like, you're changing the mindset of the individual, not the corporate person. So yeah.
Yeah. And then that's very important too, because I mean, look at how we've gone from working in offices to a lot of people majority working remotely during the pandemic. That's super important. And it's funny because, this month is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And, I've been doing a lot of talks for companies and for law enforcement. And the biggest, most demanded talk was how to keep your home safe. What to look out for your home, because now that home has now become part of the corporate network, because the only thing standing between you and that environment is a VPN tunnel. And, the company has to rely on the security of the home user in order to maintain their security as a company. So it's become a huge factor. And I do think that communication has gotten a lot better, over the years. I remember when I first started, it was more the long-haired guys with the beards behind the door that nobody talked to. And when they came out, didn't want to speak to you anyways. And now it's become more open and more, I guess, transparent. I'd like to see the ransomware definitely go down. And you talked about MFA, multi-factor authentication. Most of the ransomware that I've done instant response on, the majority is basics, like lack of MFA, just dumb things like that. Or I used a VPN, service that there was a vulnerability that came out yesterday and I just didn't patch. Things like that, simple things. And I think that, as a pen tester, you mentioned earlier, seeing the same things and doing the same type of hacks or whatever. The amount of old vulnerabilities and the amount of trash on the internet, as far as like, SQL Blaster or MS Blaster or, the old viruses that still float around, they're still there and they're still effective. And it surprises me that after all this time, people haven't gotten better at doing that part of cybersecurity, the maintaining hygiene and the basic fundamentals. Do you see that a lot at, doing your blue team stuff? Do you see a lot of that as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've worked at a couple organizations of various, sector, various business size and stuff. And for me, it's always followed the money, right? Even with the ransomware or you were talking earlier about, global policy and everything like that. It's follow the money, follow the money. And this is no different, right? So if you've got these Windows XP machines on the network, they should be replaced. Well, replacement costs money. Business doesn't see value because really the application that's running on it still works, right? So they're not seeing it as a business improvement. They're just seeing it as a cost for no business value, right? So I think that is part of the challenge and struggle that we deal with as practitioners. Also, and this gets back to security awareness training as well, because education is so critical, because most people want to do the right thing, right? Most people aren't just F the business. Like they want to do the right thing. They just don't know any better. But when you see these internet facing systems that are improperly configured, oftentimes it's because someone was just trying to get something done. They were trying to set it up and they just pulled it out of the box, plugged it in, and packets were moving across and the light lit up. So it's good to go, right? They're IT people. This is another thing that I'm on the bandwagon championing that a lot of people don't get. Like IT and InfoSec are two different domains. They do have a Venn diagram overlap, but they're two different domains. They're interested on the packets are flying across the network. I'm interested if it's appropriate. And, if you have just the IT person doing the setup, then they're going to set it up and go. And I think that's another part of this, follow the money, right? So maybe that organization doesn't have InfoSec, or they expect the IT person to be InfoSec as well. And it's just not the case. So I feel like, that's really the genesis of why these things are out there on the internet. But I agree with you. It is, I don't want to say sad, but it's disappointing that in 2021, with all of the pub around all of the cybersecurity incidents and situations, that some organizations still continue to, basically play the ostrich and head in the sand game where, it won't be us. You know what I mean? Like we're too small, right? You hear that. So.
Yeah, I've seen that a million times. A lot of the ransomware incident response I do are for those smaller companies that have that mindset of who wants to attack us, and the quick answer is they don't. A lot of the ransomware, the way those groups work, a lot of them don't actually care what they're hacking into or what they're dropping the ransomware. They have a group that scans the internet, scans IP addresses. They hand that over to the second group who does the exploitation. All they're doing is looking at the vulnerabilities and exploiting. Then they hand the results and they sell that network access to bad actors. And they're the ones who drop the ransomware. So, I mean, it's so segmented, but people need to understand that to them, you're an IP address. They're not looking at how much you made last year. Of course, there are instances where ransomware gangs will target specific companies, but the vast majority, they don't care what business you're in. They look at your IP and look at your vulnerabilities. That's it. And that's how you end up on the dark web. So I think that, like you said, it's not really sad. It's just disappointing. And I think it's lack of education and lack of knowledge. I think that, part of what I try to do is I try to explain to companies and individuals how the mindset is of the attacker and the psychology behind it and why they do what they do and the motivations, and try to give them some sort of insight on how they operate. Because I don't think enough is focused on the actual person, the psychology behind it. All they talk about is what motivates money or this or that, the other. They don't really dive into the mindset. The DoD did a really cool research project called Project Tularosa. that I was involved in out at Sandia National Labs. And what they did was they got a bunch of us together and monitored our breathing, perspiration, heart rate, all that stuff, eye movement, keystrokes, as we hacked into what we were told was a SCADA network. And that way they could look at the different responses, get into psychology, and they would stop us midstream and give us like cognitive tests and crypto challenges just to see how we functioned, right? And I think a lot of that needs to get into the private sector and to the public sector. It needs to spread, the knowledge of how they work, why they work, their mindset, how they calculate things. Because I don't think we have enough knowledge or information or a database on that type of activity. And psychology does play a huge part in why people attack and why people get attacked. I mean, I could go on, for a whole show over that. But yeah, I think it's same thing with defense, right? With blue team, there's a certain psychology behind blue team. And you always hear the old additive of, the attacker only has to be right one time and the blue team has to be right all the time. I don't buy into that whole scheme because as offender, we do have to be right most of the time. Like we could make one small mistake and it throw up red flags. As a blue team leader, how do you feel about, being right all the time and the pressure that's put on the blue team and those analysts?
Okay. I'm really glad you asked that question, because I have a soapbox item also that I'm, gonna self-identify with. But really quick, I want to point out that you'll have to tell me what the Project Testarossa was either after the show, because I Googled it and there's a super yacht called Project Testarossa that is the first Google result. So
it's Tularosa, Tula.
Oh, Tularosa.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there is a super yacht called Project Testarossa. All right, yeah. So the soapbox that I'm on, again, is we call it cybersecurity, and that term is so slick and so smooth that it's not going to go anywhere, right? It used to be information security, now it's cybersecurity. I'm an advocate of the term cyber resilience or cyber resiliency, right? Which is essentially the idea that you're going to get attacked successfully. So the idea is, how do you maintain business operations while you're dealing with an incident, right? So like while the house is on fire or while the building's on fire, how can you continue to make widgets while the firefighters are putting it out? Because we don't have the convenience of shutting the operation down, rebuilding and moving forward. Like that's just not going to work in a business operations atmosphere. So to me, it's not about defending, like obviously we defend, right? But it's not about defending exclusively. It's about defending and having resiliency built into your protection schema, so you can, address the issues and recover quickly with limited impact to your organization. And also to your point about being right every time versus the attacker being right once. I've worked enough in the field that like, I used to say that, right? I used to, bandy about that particular phrase, the cyber defender dilemma, but I don't subscribe to it anymore, because here's the thing. with multiple controls in place, like the Swiss cheese model that they have, if you have layered controls, defense in depth, to use a CISP word, like if an admin runs malware, right? Like they download malware because they got tricked, they run it under their admin credentials, PowerShell launches. Typically it's a dropper, and like malware is going to go pull down a payload, right? So yes, they succeeded there, but then you have DNS filtering, and the C2 domain gets blocked and shut down. My tools light up. I go quarantine, eradicate, and remove and move on, right? So the attacker succeeded in some capacity, but their overall mission didn't succeed. And we were able to effectively be resilient because there was an impact or an explosion, a detonation, if you will, of the malware, of one stage of the malware, but it didn't effectively compromise my organization or my segments or whatever like that. So, attackers, we joke that it's like point and click and you guys just walk through and then you go get a cup of coffee and talk about how great you are. But in reality, they have to work too. And also, if you've ever tried to do like a home lab or like download a tool and play with it, like you quickly find out that it's not as slick as that, right? Like it might be the wrong version of like you have Windows 10, but it's like Windows 10 R28173 with this patch on it, not this patch. And you got to have like a Ukrainian keyboard layout. you know what I mean? Like it's got to be perfect. And that's why tech demos fail all the time. So, so I don't think attackers have it that easy. I don't think defenders have to be right all the time. And, I'm going to get the t-shirts made up that says I work in cyber resiliency.
I think I'll be the first purchaser of that T-shirt because I strictly adhere to, going against that whole idea of, blue team has to be right all the time. You talk about segmentation. So micro segmentation, I thought I'd never seen it in action until I started doing IRs for the company I'm with now. And the micro segmentation that some of these platforms do is amazing, and it makes things difficult, and it makes IR a lot easier. When you have the things micro-segmented. We just recently did a incident response where we were able to dig them out quicker than cyber liability insurance could respond. And that says a lot about how much advancement we've made in defense and defense platforms. So, we've talked about the industry, we've talked about issues within the industry. I want to get into more of Gerald. So what do you do on your spare time? I know you're a father, I know you have a family. How do you balance work and home life and keep that homeostasis right in the middle?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I'm very structured, I'm very organized, I'm very explicit and deliberate with my time. So like time management. So when I'm working, and when I'm family. And I used to do this, but I try not to do it now. Like I don't like check work email like at family time. I have that compartmentalization. I do try to do a lot of overlap and economies of scale. So some of the things that I talk about on Simply Cyber, like I never script anything because I don't have time for that. But like some of the things I talk about, it's something I already know very comfortably. So I just hit record and go for it. Or if it's something I want to know about, like I'll fold it into my job. Or if there's something I'm doing at work, then I'll fold that into a Simply Cyber episode. So I'm not, spending time working and then spending time doing Simply Cyber. There is kind of overlap in it. I do take some vacations, not really, not a lot, but I will tell you, like for me, cybersecurity is a lifestyle. Like I love it. And I think that's part of the reason why I would, identify as doing well in the field. I love it. I think about it. I listen to it. It's part of like my mindset and everything like that. So, I don't really see, I don't call it work because it is a job I get paid for, but I enjoy doing it. And when I'm not at work, I'm still like kind of cybersecurity thing. So there's a lot of interplay with that. So I'm able to kind of, I guess, manage it because when I'm in the moment of something, I'm focused on that something. And I try to maximize, this is like a micro tip. I don't know if anyone else does this, but like, say you're going to be in a meeting at work, right? It's 1:00 on a Tuesday, standard meeting time, right? And it's 12:50. Okay. Like I have a list of tasks, like, I write down task lists all the time. I run through this tool called Notion. Well, I've got 10 minutes, right? I'm going to sit there for 10 minutes, or even better, it's a business meeting where it's like we do updates to the business and like the apps person's got to go, the IT person's got to go. But I've heard this briefing 4 times already. So I know exactly what everyone's going to say. So I know I've got 20 minutes of downtime. Like I'll knock out 2 10-minute tasks, or I'll knock out a 15-minute task, right? Like multitasking, but really it's more about executing like all my time. I'm trying to execute and get stuff done. Like I do, unfortunately, some people might be like, oh, that doesn't sound fun at all. Like, yeah, I don't like have a lot of time to do things like Netflix and chill and stuff like that, but that's okay. This is what I want. So that's kind of, I guess, how I manage that. I will say this is like kind of an honest admission. I do feel like Simply Cyber and the work I'm doing there, it's starting to reach like a threshold. And I've actually talked to some larger YouTube content creators about this, and they said this is a thing that everyone deals with, and you got to figure out how to kind of break through it. But I'm starting to get overwhelmed, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I said earlier I was only doing it once a week. Now I've got 2 streams. I'm kind of ad hoc doing a 3rd stream. There's a lot going on. A lot of people come to me. A lot of people engage me. I get speaking engagements all over the place. I know you do too, Mike. And it's just it gets hard when like you start losing things or forgetting things, or you don't write them down, and that's frustrating for me because I feel like I'm not losing control, but like there's more things that require time than I have time for. So, but at the macro level, I do dad and husband hard, and then I work hard.
Yeah, that's a good point. So recently, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Elon Musk, but they were talking about how they divide their time, and they go down to the 15-minute increments of time, which is just amazing. I couldn't. There's no way that I could schedule my life in 15-minute increments. It's just insane. But the whole overwhelming with the podcast and stuff like that, like I've reached that point so many times, which is really difficult for me because it's become a passion. But just like this week, right? This is, I think, my second or third podcast this week that I've recorded. I love doing it, but it does come with a price, right? I mean, I get exhausted afterwards. A lot of people don't know it, but when I'm on a podcast, I really have to focus on being that face and being social and asking the right questions. And there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And then you throw in neurodivergence, and it's just like that neurodiversity is like, you really have to fight that too. So for me, it's like a full exercise. By the time I get done with an hour-long podcast, I'm exhausted. I literally have to go lay down for like an hour or two. But what brings me back to it, and what's so satisfying, is meeting people like you and giving good content to people who are hungry for it. But yeah, I've definitely reached that level where it got to be overwhelming, and I really had to step back and go, is this something I really want to do? At one point, I had done 40 something episodes back to back every Saturday for at least an hour a piece. And at that point, I was like, I need to take a vacation. So I took off for a little bit for a weekend, and just being gone that one weekend and not doing that one podcast drove me insane. Like I felt like I was neglecting something.
Yeah.
So now, I do as many episodes as I can. And that gives me the buffer. Like if I want to take a week off, I can, just use an episode that I pre-recorded and just, release that. But I don't like to do that because I like to have the conversation and make it readily available like that so people can tune in. Gerald, I have to say, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on. I really respect what you do, and I love your podcast. Please don't stop that. And if people want to catch up with you or listen to your podcast, can you give them the details on where to go and what to do and how to listen?
Yeah. So the easiest way for folks to find me would be go to the website simplycyber.io. I've got many different things going on right now, but that's kind of like ground zero where you can get to everything. So I got the YouTube channel. You can consume it that way in the live streams, and I have a bunch of free resources there. So yeah, go there, and my contact information is there, my LinkedIn, the Discord server, all the ways that you could possibly get to me physically, or not physically, digitally, and communicate with me.
Awesome. Well, I do appreciate it. And before we go, do you have any questions for me or any questions about the community that I can answer or help you out with?
No questions come to mind right away. I mean, I've loved this conversation and getting to know you. I guess, one question that just kind of spurs to mind, when I started Simply Cyber, I really had the idea that I was going to help people, but I had the idea that the people I was going to help are 22-year-old college graduates who are going to enter the workforce. I had no idea of transitioning military, pivoting career, the electrician we talked about earlier. So my idea of who I'm speaking to is expanded, and I make content for all of those people, and some of it's generic to apply to all of them. You had mentioned, or you had volunteered being neurodivergent. I have some members in my community that I know for a fact are autistic, and and I've they consume my content, and that's great. But as someone who's neurodivergent, is there anything that I could do better to tailor content for that community?
Well, what you're doing is like fantastic. So when I listen to your podcast, I get exactly what I need, and it's very straightforward. It's very understandable. There's not a lot of confusion. So the biggest problem I have is when people say something and they're using idiom or talk about something metaphorically. Being able to convert that into something I understand can be difficult at times. But when people like you talk and it's straight to the point and it's factual and there's not a lot of room for interpretation, it's awesome. That's why I sat on your podcast last weekend for the whole time I was walking, because I can ingest that. But it's the social things that get kind of confusing, and it's when people use metaphors or aren't speaking very literally that is hard to understand sometimes. But I try to stay as genuine as possible, and I know you do too. And that to me makes a good podcast and makes people want to watch it. Is we are who we are, and we put it out there, and we're genuine about it. So that's what I respect about yours 100%. That it's a great podcast. And you as a person, I've never met anybody so positive, so upbeat. I know you're not like that all the time. It's impossible for somebody to be like that all the time. But the image you portray is awesome, man. And you're a great guest. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate that.
Cool. So that's it for this episode of the Haunted Hacker Podcast. And I hope to see you guys again soon. Gerald, you're welcome anytime. Drop by the Discord. I'm sure I'll drop by yours. And I look forward to more talks in the future. See you guys later.